Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cando's presentation of the Mining Equals Opportunity for Indigenous Communities in Ontario. This is another of our ongoing series in partnerships with Natural Resources Canada to look at each region, each province and territory in Canada, and look at the nature and the history of exploration in each of the territories and provinces, and the opportunities for Indigenous communities that may see it as a way forward in terms of developing their local economic development. Cando is not prescribing this as a solution. We're just merely presenting the information for consideration by communities and economic development officers. With us today is Cando's certification coordinator for Western Canada, Geraldine Potts. Geraldine will introduce our speaker for today. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm not sure if you can see me. I can't find my camera button, but I'm here. I just wanted to say that I've been at Cando for about a year now, and this is probably my second mining webinar introduction. So if I make a mistake, I'm still learning. But I have the privilege of introducing Robert Bob Stewart, geoscientist and professional geologist. Welcome, Bob. Growing up in Montreal in the 1960s was foundational for Bob's international geological exploration career. Scouting provided basic bush skills and rough camping opportunities that generated into a lifelong respect for sustainable living within the environment. Bob started in the early 70s in New Brunswick, and his international geological career includes over 15 years working in Ontario at the Carleton University. Graduate study and teaching focused on mineral economics, economic geology, exploration geochemistry, and environmental geology, with summers spent on mineral exploration projects. Bob also spent 9 years in Ontario with major mining companies exploring for gold and base metals around Noranda and Timmins, and then settled in Duncan on Vancouver Island, where he worked on base metal exploration projects in British Columbia, Northwest Territories, and Alaska. Another move in 1991 started his present connection to Nova Scotia. Then in 1994, Bob moved to Sudbury, Ontario, and expanded his research horizons to global projects that included fieldwork in Africa. In 1997, Bob began consulting services and moved back to Nova Scotia, where he formed Indigenous Incorporated. Bob's longstanding interest in best professional practices for Canadian geoscientists and engineers continues as a subject matter expert on the National Professional Practice Examination Advisory Committee. In 2021, Geoscience Canada recognized his longstanding service to the geoscience profession with their fellowship designation, FGC. Cando is pleased that Bob has taken the opportunity to provide economic development officers with information about Ontario's past and present relationships with its mineral resources and potential opportunities for the future. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to Bob. Welcome, Bob, and I turn the mic back over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Are we ready to go, Paul?
Please do.
Okay. And so let's starting off with a acknowledgement that this land is the ancestral homeland of many Indigenous people and communities that have a continuous and enduring relationship with the land. And thanks to Cando and Natural Resources Canada for their support, and the presented content is my sole responsibility. I'm speaking to you from Halifax in Mi'kma'ki on the east coast of this map. This map of from the Atlas of Canada shows the centers for Ontario Indigenous communities, and each community's traditional territory expands well away from these centers. Today's presentation is going to be in 3 parts with interactive opportunities between each of the part. Major section of the is going to be the economic overview, then followed with looking at the Ontario mining life cycle, and then ending with a few key points for economic development officers. So the references are all going to be provided in appendices, and that will be available online. So my role today is to first look at the economic overview and recognizing the basis for Indigenous opportunities, then followed with the full life cycle and then the follow-up. So this first section is going to start with Indigenous participation and opportunity, looking at the past and bringing us up to the present, then moving on to the economic and environmental benefits of mining in Ontario, and then some thoughts about why this isn't a very well understood sector of our society. So we'll start with the early history. And being a geologist, we go back 4.5 billion years ago when the Earth and Moon collided, and the Earth ended up becoming enriched with the core of the other protoplanet adding to ours. The Moon then set itself up and has been tidally forcing the movement of the tides of our oceans, but also at times it reacts with the metals that are in the core and bringing them to surface. So a few major geological events that occurred was around 2.7 billion years ago, when the Archean greenstone belts that we see throughout northern Ontario had rich hot spring gold and base metals coming out on the seafloor. And that's that special time that lasted about 20 million years counts for most of the precious metal and base metal deposits in northern Ontario. A meteorite impacted the Sudbury area 1.849 billion years ago and created a crater that was filled with molten material, and copper, nickel, and platinum group elements settled out of that melt. And then 1.1 billion years ago, the land started to split up. It wasn't called North America, or wasn't North America at that time, but the mid-continent rift system generated, formed in this colored, these green and yellow and red colored areas around the Lake Superior. And some of the initial ore deposits that were mined are from this region. Moving ahead to just over 400 million years ago, this central area of North America was covered with an inland sea that, when it slowly dried out, the evaporite minerals of salt and gypsum and limestones formed thick beds. And then finally, the last main geological event was related to the ice ages, and 75,000 to 11,000 years ago, the ice was on top of us 4 kilometers thick. And that ice gouged the rocks, making much of the aggregate, the sand, gravel, and clay that we mine today. So it was about 20,000 years ago that all this water that was tied up in the ice allowed for the first migrations of people across the Brunswick land bridge. And after about 7,000 years, there was another impact event that happened 12,895 years ago that caused the 1,200-year cold snap with global wildfires, the mass extinctions of megafauna, and a major change to the existing Clovis culture. About 9,500 years ago, the world's first copper industry flourished around Lake Superior. Here is where there's 95% pure copper that was accessed through thousands of shallow workings. Greatest workings are in the Keweenaw Peninsula and Ile Royale. The peak copper mining in this period was 7,000 to 5,000 years ago. And this is cross-correlated to elevated lead levels in the lake sediments. The maximum estimate of the early Indigenous copper production of 1.5 billion pounds would exceed the Ontario's current annual copper production. These the copper that was mined was made into a number of projectile points from that native copper. And later, the copper was about 3,500 years ago, the usage changed to include beads, necklace, and pendants that have been widely traded and found across North America. So starting in 1842, the Geological Survey of Canada was formed, and government geologists were set out to observe the terrain, geology, ethnology, and mineral occurrences. And they did this with the assistance of Indigenous guides and meeting with community members. And 100 years ago, there's 30 anthropological reports that were written by the Geological Survey, or published by the Geological Survey, that goes into many of the social aspects of these meetings with the community. These early government surveys and railroad building resulted in mineral discoveries, and new systems were soon needed to manage mineral development. The system changed when the Hudson Bay Company relinquished its title, and it went from being an exclusive mineral title ownership by one company to the competitive finders keepers claim model. And so in theory, this created an opportunity for persons with local knowledge to benefit through participation in mineral resource discovery and development. Then around Confederation, federal land use management shifted to provinces, and mineral claim staking was formalized. And so that the stakeholder needed to prove their claim within specified time limits through assessment. And that's still largely the system that we have today. Charlie Angus's book, Cobalt, is a great read about early mining as well. he talks about the silver objects from Algonquin and Ojibwe mining and manufacturing industries in the Cobalt-Galganda region that have been found in Hopewell sites that are 1,800 years old, that are centered on the Mississippi and extend down to New Orleans. Indigenous peoples around Lake Temiskaming, the home of the Cobalt District, is the reason why Charlie Angus's book is centered on cobalt. Is the chief Ignace Tonene recognized gold outcrops and followed the system, staked the first gold claims in the Kirkland Lake, Larder Lake region, and had them claim jumped in 1906 by prospectors and developers who built the rich Caradison mine. About that same time in 1896, Skookum Jim Mason, a prospector and Tagish member of the Taklitwidi clan, along with his nephew, sister, and her American husband, George Carmack, staked, discovered, and developed gold from Rabbit Creek, Bonanza Creek, and this started the Klondike Gold Rush. The idea of panning for gold and placer gold, like the Klondike, is still what a lot of people think about Canadian gold mining is all about, and hope to show you how different gold mining today is from these early days. So for the past 15 years, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada has annually awarded the Skookum Jim Award to a Canadian Indigenous person who has demonstrated exceptional achievement and or service to the mining industry. 5 recent recipients include these lady and gentlemen that are shown here. So the traditional staking, the mineral tenure laws in Ontario were introduced in 1864, and the system at the time allowed for the rapid development of mines. So in Sudbury, the staking to the first mining occurred within 5 years. In cobalt, it was within 3 years, and gold mines in Timmins were able to be developed within 4 years. The Mining Act at that time was revised in 1908, and that those rules lasted for most of a century. The physical claim staking of using 4 posts that are erected with clear lines between the posts was the system for over 150 years. And this led to lots of disputes, and a good alternative came along, and that was map staking. Ontario adopted map staking in 2018 for its mineral tenure system, and this is managed online through the Mining Lands Administration system. Aggregate and industrial mineral tenure permits follow different paths. And that brings us to the, after a 25-year consultation period, in 2007, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was put together. And in Canada, the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission recorded calls to actions 43 and 44, which calls for all governments to adopt UN DRIP. And Canada and British Columbia have done that. So far, Ontario has tried, but still, to my knowledge, does not have a UN DRIP Act. So as we look at our history and of mining in Ontario, this website shows in the small dots the 6,183 old mine sites or mine sites that are in Ontario, which represents 43% of Canada's total. Most of these mines, or the greatest period of activity for building mines, was in the 1930s during the Depression, when things were people were trying to find any way of surviving. So a lot of these dots are very small operations, very small mines, and not representative of today's mining industry. So a lot of the historical mines and systems are still under review today. The recent work on the 1850 treaty annuities with Robinson Huron represents a settlement for $10 billion for all past mining, but does not include going forward. The recent challenge in British Columbia to their online staking system needs to be sorted out over the next few years, and that may have implications here in Ontario. Historical mine site reclamation could represent an opportunity because responsibility for some of the historical mines is a federal responsibility. So in the past 30 years, there's been a variety of forward-looking agreements made for mineral exploration and development projects between communities and mining industry proponents, and many more agreements are in progress. So the project proponents, it's in our best practices that to show preference of working with community businesses near a project whenever possible. And community businesses can make themselves more attractive to proponents when the businesses can demonstrate significant Indigenous participation. Indigenous community businesses can maximize the benefits of set-aside contracts for procurement of goods and services that are included within the community and proponent agreements or other agreements, such as the federal government agreements. So looking at where these active agreements are from another Atlas of Canada webpage, we see that there's 17 current impact and benefits agreements and a total of 142 overall agreements. And you can see that they're mainly spread across Northern Ontario. Some of the capacity building that is available on the PDAC website shows 7 economic development programs that are available for the different mining stages. Here they use 6 mining stages from pre-exploration to post-closure. And there's also capacity building programs for other aspects of that EDO officers can take advantage of. So let's look at the economic and environmental benefits for Canada. Is that the mining industry includes employment for almost 2/3 of a million people, and the 106 are in mining directly, and almost 3 times that in mineral processing. A lot of professionals are moving, or like myself, who worked in Ontario but lived in Nova Scotia. We can do interprovincial work is common in mining because our role in a mining venture only lasts for a short period of time until we move it to the next step. So mineral exploration and development projects have a high staff turnover. Seasonality can also affect a lot of programs. The best estimates are that about 16,500 people are employed in mining at the earlier stages of the mining process. And across Canada, minerals represent 22% of merchandise exports, and 175 million tons of minerals move on trains annually, representing 53% of their tonnage. So the mining sector accounted to about 5% of Canada's gross domestic product, and the mineral production value was about $61 billion across Canada. And when we take a look and break it down into a simplified economic model of primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector, we see that in this graphic that mining represents about 15% of the primary resource sector, and that the primary resource sector represents about 13% of the overall economy in Canada. And 17% is in manufacturing, making things of the raw materials that came from fossil fuels, utilities, agriculture, wildlife, forestry, and mining. And then there's the tertiary part of the services sector of the economy that accounts for 70% of the Canadian economy. When we look at Ontario the same way, about 9% of the census data shows that in 2016, about 9% of the mining industry workforce was Indigenous, and that about 13% of the workforce were women. The Ontario mining sector currently employs about 78,000, again, 31,000 directly in mining, getting the material out of the ground, with another 47,000 jobs in the downstream mineral processing and services sector. So having been involved in Ontario for over 50 years, I can say that it's in the last 30 years, it's become better regulated, better paid, and safer. And the professional aspects of the mining industry has changed, has increased over that same time period. And the professional subculture has a primary duty of protection of the public and the environment. So when we look at that same type of economic breakdown of primary resources, secondary, and tertiary, we see that Ontario only has 4% coming from its primary resource sector. However, it doesn't have a fossil fuel sector. And mining accounts for about a quarter of the primary resource sector, comparable to the contribution of agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. And the other half is provided by utilities. Manufacturing is built on top of that 4%, about 20%, and the service sector is up to around 77%, rather than the 70% that the across Canada GDP contributions were. So in 2022, about $13.5 billion was produced from Ontario. And this came, there were 5,192 aggregate pits and quarries, 17 precious metal mines, 9 base metal mines, and 9 industrial mineral mines. And there was almost $1 billion spent on 323 projects in exploration in 2022, of which more than 43 of these were advanced exploration projects. So as I was putting this presentation together, got to this point, and I was getting sick and tired of throwing out numbers, and so that wanted to put some visualizations in here. And so today's precious metal mines have very large tonnages with very low grades that can only be reliably determined by systematic sampling and accurate assaying. So today's high grade is for precious metal mines is only 6 grams per ton. And so what does 6 grams per ton mean? And so 6 grams per ton is equivalent to the area that a shadow cast by a baseball on the infield at Rogers Center would be. And that another word for that is 6 parts per million, 6 grams per ton, 0.2 troy ounces per ton, 6,000 parts per billion. And when explorationists like myself go out and sample rock outcrops, we can get excited about 15 parts per billion, because even though it's 400 times 400 times less than what is an ore grade type sample, it's an indication that a gold forming system might have been present. And so that some other parallels as to the what the you go to your local regulation hockey rink, and the shadow of a golf ball represents 1 part per million of that total hockey rink surface. So it's really small, and that gold doesn't all clump together in these deposits. It's mainly as dust-sized particles that are spread out through the whole rock. And so other dimensions that we're going to be talking about are the CN Tower and about the Rogers Center. And that the Rogers Center, with the roof closed, the interior is 1.6 cubic meters. And so things like, what does a ton mean? Well, a ton of gold is about 36 times smaller than a ton of lithium. And so that the volumes, I've included some volume numbers here. So one of the biggest components of Ontario's mining industry is finance. 29%, it's recognized as the global center for mining in the world, exploration and mining. 29% of the global $17 billion of investment in new mining equities goes through the Toronto Exchange and Toronto Venture Exchange. Excuse me. So the finance is a big component, but let's look at the other 4 sectors, which are aggregate, industrial minerals, base metals, and precious metals. And so I've highlighted in green here some of the critical numbers that to become familiar with. That aggregate is in 5,012 sites across the country, whereas all the rest of the mines account for only 35 mines across Ontario. The volume of material that is produced in Ontario from aggregate is equal to filling the Rogers Centre 40 times. And that represents about 1/8 or 12% of the total sales of mineral resource material mined in Ontario in a year. When we look at industrial minerals, and with aggregate, almost everything is everything that's taken out of the ground from surface goes to a end user. The industrial minerals include both surface and underground operations. There's 9 different mine sites operated by 7 companies, and they have about 2% waste because they involve underground developments that not everything that comes to surface can be sold on. And the volume there is about 3 Rogers centers. Copper, nickel, cobalt, zinc are the base metals, and they're from 9 mine sites operated by 3 companies, and they're 1 in Timmins and 8 in Sudbury, and the total volume mined is equivalent to 1 Rogers Centre. When we look at precious metals, this is the big, when we think about mining in Ontario, it's mainly the gold mining, with 1 platinum palladium mine as well. So precious metals account for 52% of the sales, and they're mining such low grades that almost all of what they mine is waste, and only a very small proportion is ore. And over about 30 Rogers centers is mined a year. So looking at precious metals, the reason why they're precious is that they're worth about $67,000 a kilogram, and a kilogram would equate to just over half a hockey puck. So a full hockey puck of gold is equal to about $100,000. The value for base metals, copper, cobalt, and nickel, drops down to just over $20 for a hockey puck size volume. And when we look at industrial minerals, there's different values. Specialty minerals like wollastonite and clay products and nepheline cyanide command a higher value, but the overall value is about 12 cents a kilogram. And then aggregate is only worth about 1 cent per kilogram. And so that the volumes involved or the values of the different volumes are important to understand. There's lots of good production data that I'm providing references to from both federal government and Ontario government sites. And so that when we take a look at what this annual production in Ontario is, using the numbers from 2022, last year, that the amount of aggregate filled 40 Rogers centers, 3 for industrial minerals. Base metals filled 1 Rogers center, but the actual volume was about 26,000 cubic meters. That's about a quarter of one of our local Costco stores. It is also the equivalent to filling the Blue Jays infield, just the area between the 4 bases, 40% to the roof of the Rogers Center. When we use that same analogy for gold, platinum, and palladium, out of that 30 Rogers centers volume, only 7.6 cubic meters is 1. The size is about of precious metals involved, 1 across the Ontario mines is about the size of a small Bronco SUV. That's another way of looking at it, is that a cube about 2 foot on a side, 63 centimeters per side, is what is produced at the end of the day from a Rogers Center volume of rock. So where to find information is the Ontario Geological Survey Resident Geologist's Office in one of your regions, and their annual reports. And I've got lots more sources that are in Appendix A at the end of the presentation. So Ontario's divided into 10 different districts with 8 offices, and they produce 6 annual reports. And the annual reports provide detailed information on the region's mining activity, exploration activity, what the resident geologist office staff has been doing, and getting out. They do property examinations and make recommendations for exploration, and are involved in land use planning. Moving on to where things are for each of the different sectors, the over almost 6,000 pits across Ontario for aggregate pits and quarries are mainly concentrated in southern Ontario. This graphic has each bullet has the number of operations, and as you move to the north, the bullets are getting wider spaced apart with lower numbers. The principal legislation for the aggregate industry is not the Mining Act, it's the Aggregate Resources Act. We saw that it has a value of about 1 cent per kilogram, and that about 60% of the cost of aggregate is in transportation. And so that Ontario, the Greater Toronto Area, supplies about 25% of the aggregate, but they consume 40% of Ontario's aggregate. And we have to remember that the total volume in Ontario accounts for about 40 Rogers centers. A good thing about aggregate is that there's no chemical processing. Washing tends to be a closed system where the water all gets reused, and there's very negligible waste. And aggregate is critical for drinking water purity, so that communities with drinking water concerns aggregate as part of their solution. This graphic here shows just how far away Toronto, the aggregate needs of Toronto are being coming from as far as Manitoulin and North Bay. So the aggregate sector, from an economic point of view, it's got the shortest and simplest mineral resource timeline from discovery to development. And so that we also have to recognize that Southern Ontario provided 23% of the total mineral wealth for all of Ontario in 2019. And that it has a lot of people, over 9,000 people employed directly and indirectly. And other aggregate commodities include dimension stone, especially aggregate cement, brick, trap, and gemstone sites. one of the smallest of the smallest of 35 active mines in Ontario in 2023 was is the Tom Clyde Iron Mine, which is 100 kilometers north of Kingston. This is a small iron mine. Magnetite is taken from an open pit, and the total disturbed area within this forest is about 250 meters by 120 meters. The reason for this mine, that the magnetite is used in concrete for its favorable density characteristics that make nuclear medical facilities safer. Moving on to industrial minerals, salt has 4 operations: gypsum, 1 operation; methylene cyanide, 1; wollastonite, talc, each one. These still fall under the Mining Act. Together, they account for $1 billion, or 7% of mining's GDP in Ontario. It's got about 10 times the resource value, 10 cents a kilogram on average, but salt's only worth about 4 kilograms, 4 cents per kilogram on average. It represents 4% of the total volume mined in Ontario. And in this industry, you have to have your downstream customers lined up in advance. It's a specialty market. There's negligible exploration. Finding the customer is where the real exploration is. And these types of deposits tend to be long-term development timelines. They have very little waste coming out of the mine. 80% of Ontario's salt, however, is used on roads for public safety. And so the demand is directly related to how the winter is going. So the world's largest underground salt mine is out under the waters of Lake Huron, and it's been mining there since 1959. Compass Minerals currently holds the mining lease that's outlined in blue here. That's about just 8 kilometers by 6 kilometers under the lake. They have a production capacity around 7 million tons a year. We see it on our pantry shelves as Sifto salt, but as I say, 80% is out on the put onto roads. The mining is occurring about the depth of deeper than 1 CN tower tall. And when we look at this profile view, we see that they're using continuous miners and bringing it up and able to load it on to the ships at Lake Erie. Down at by Windsor and Detroit is another salt mine, the Ojibwe mine, that's been mining since 1893, and it's better known as Windsor salt. And here the bed of salt is about 12.5 meters thick, and they're able to use bulk mining techniques to get it up to surface. Both the Windsor and the Sifto salt have parallel solution mining and evaporation operations. So when we look at the value added, there's salt, dress stone, ceramics and glass, infrastructure, foundations like the cement being used, or cement and concrete are used for building infrastructure. In our homes, the wallboard or gyprock is coming out of the gyprock mine, and wallboard plant is right next to that Hagersville gyprock mine. And we also are mining to improve the soil in agriculture. Moving along to base metals, there's 9 mine sites with 3 operators, and as I say, the total mined is about 1 Rogers Center. The Kid Creek mine, operated by Glencore, is a copper, zinc, silver mine. All the rest are nickel, copper, platinum group element deposits in Sudbury. Kid Creek is where I worked for over 8 years, and it's almost 60 years old and approaching its end of mine life. It's been mined to over 3,000 meters below surface. That is the deepest point, the closest point to the center of the earth that you can get to from surface. The only deeper is to go in a submersible down into the Mariana Trench. The 2022 production accounted for about 24% of the base metal volume mined, even though it's at such a great depth. Land ownership here is not state claims, but were veterans' patents that were issued in 1905. In Sudbury, the 8 operations that are surround the outside of the Sudbury structure, and they're mining the nickel copper that settled out from that impact melt, and they're all at the base of the structure. The mines are located around the rim, but they are able to extend to depth. Precious metal mines include the Lactazil mine near Thunder Bay, operated by Impala. This is the only pure palladium mine in the world. There's a picture here showing what the high-grade ore looks like. And the palladium, really, you cannot know whether this gabbroic host that is ore. You have to rely upon the assays from the lab. When it turns to gold, these are the gold mine operations across Ontario. So the precious metal mines have a finished product value worth tens of thousands of dollars per kilogram, $60,000 per kilogram, and the size of a hockey puck of precious metals is worth about $100,000, but it's only coming from 1 to 2 grams per ton. This is a very fine dust of precious metals throughout the rock, and so highly efficient milling and processing is needed to recover this precious metals. And from a full Rogers Center, 1.6 million cubic meters of ore, you only get a cube that's about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, 63 centimeters per side. So part 1D, why is the mining cycle not well known? Well, it's in Canada, the land and its minerals are shared by the public under evolving understandings and agreements. reality placer mining shows do not represent Ontario's professional mining today. The mineral industry's continued role is rarely considered. Mines are easily overlooked. That there's only 35 mines in Ontario. Some of them underwater is an easy way to see that they're not why they're overlooked. And the mines are often located away from where people are. They're not in most of the population's backyard. The mineral product origins are often unrecognized by the end user. And all our recycling of metals has to end up going through a mineral processing plant, like a smelter and a refinery. So the mining industry has to restrict its access for safety reasons. And so that you might only be able to do an overlook or attend a mining site on special days. So regulations and thin economic margins for the public's benefit require focus on safety, confidentiality, environmental protection, cost-effective production and processing by qualified and responsible professionals. So, Paul, here's our first break. Opportunity for break. Are you there?
I'm here, Bob.
Okay.
We don't have any questions posted on the chat.
All right.
Did you want to take a few moments to see if someone wants to ask directly?
Sure.
Okay. Bob says if anyone on the session would like to ask a question, just please open up your microphone and ask away.
And we're about 2/3 of the way through. So
yeah, we have a question posted. Bob, what's your best advice for economic development officers to learn about mining?
Okay, we'll be covering some of that going forward, and the appendices here. I'm using a lot of the material that is available online, and so that I'm using those as a teaser for you to go to the websites that will be included in the appendix.
Very good, Bob. Okay, there are no other questions, so please proceed.
Sure. All right. And as well as getting in touch with your resident geologist's office is probably the best way of getting to know more about what your local situation is, and that provides a quite unbiased view. So, moving on to looking at the full cycle. Some of other cycles or some other slides show the mining cycle in 5 or 6 stages. I've chosen to break it out into 10 stages, and I'm highlighting for the EDOs where there are key turning points in each stage, because these are within the exploration project life cycle. There are these key turning points that provide the greatest opportunity for economic development operations. So we're going to be marching through each of these 10 stages. After I talk about regulation. In the past 30 years, the mining industry has experienced increased regulation on every front. And geologists like myself needed to prove our qualifications and we're responsible for the work on our particular stage of a project. And so that if there's the regulator will accept complaints about something that's happening on a project, and that regulator will, if the engineer or geoscientists are not working to the standards expected of them, they will be sanctioned. So professional practice guidelines are also published and are going to be available in Appendix C. And these are valuable for you to look at, because it's what it's what the professionals are expected to do regarding Indigenous consultation. And there's then a corollary of that this is how you can get back together. So when we look at this very complicated infographic, you recall that over 100 years ago, it'd take from discovery to mine was on the order of 3 to 5 years in Timmins and Sudbury and Cobalt. Well, now it is a much longer time frame, and this infographic just gives an indication of the minimum times that it takes for proponents to prepare and regulators to review projects. So these things definitely, mineral development is a lot more regulated here in the last 30 years. And another infographic from the Ontario Mining Association showing 5 stages of exploration is also true. In that it shows that community engagement occurs throughout the process. Environmental permitting occurs throughout the process, and that it takes time. Some commercial production can last as short as less than 10 years, but most of them are now being 20, 30-year mine life is what the plan is. So at the pre-exploration project generation stage, the first of the 10 stages, it starts with an idea that somebody has put together, probably a geoscientist, who's used their experience and public information and other information to integrate that to identify a potential mineral opportunity. This concept is intangible intellectual property. And confidentiality is still the only protection for such intellectual property. Charlie Angus shares in his book, Cobalt, the Ojibwe story where Nana Bijou tells the Ojibwe to keep the silver eyelet mine that they've been mining a secret from the colonizers, and so that the that's and of course once they did find out about it, the Ojibwe lost control of that mine. Meaningful Indigenous consultation by new project proponents is difficult at this stage because they have this unprotected intellectual property, but it's still widely encouraged. So early, sustained, meaningful consultation is a project's first key turning point for both the community and the proponent. And this also applies to nation with nation and community with nation, or community with company consultation. Still in the pre-exploration project generation phase, the online mineral land administration system allows for mining claims to be staked remotely with very little qualifications. Signing up to their billing system basically, and being registered as a prospect. And a mining claim is still recorded on a first come, first served basis. A mining claim is not like owning the property rights, and so that this is something that is poorly understood. And there's a lot of active mining claims. At the end of 2022, there were 345,000 mining claims, but only 35 mines in the province. That's like a 10,000 to 1 odds that a mine would be on a claim. A mine only requires a single mining claim. So mining claims, the intellectual property, and a reasonable exploration plan, and a clear understanding of project risk mitigation are needed for project financing, optioning, or sale. A securities regulator report called a National Instrument 43-101 technical report may be required at this stage for a new company or a new project. Prospectors and junior companies can self-finance their own their own prospecting activity at this early stage to try to advance the project and make it attractive for somebody to come in and take over. But the major initial financing for exploration activity is a project's third key turning point. And press releases coming out from operators will that they've been able to raise the financing is then a great opportunity for economic development officers to get in touch with the company and see how their mutual agreements are coming along. So mineral exploration isn't just out in the bush. On those 35 mine sites, almost a quarter of the total exploration budget in 2022 was spent on mine sites. But there's still $762 million being spent on exploration off mine sites, with gold accounting for 67% of the exploration expenditure, or looking for gold being 67%. One reason why is investors are interested in gold. They're not as interested in things like critical minerals. They look at the gold has a faster turnaround time as well, because the mining and milling processes are so straightforward, whereas base metal mines can involve longer time for metallurgical studies, and the same holds true for critical minerals. So we're able to now move on to the early exploration stage, which to set foot on the ground now, before, when you stake the claims, people would be on the ground. Now this is the first time people actually get on the ground, and they need a work permit to do that. And so the goal of an early exploration program is to find some indications of a mineral deposit. And we tackle that through different types of surveys. the whole goal is to define reasonable targets. And so the environmental impacts are minimal at this stage, and any impacts are a concern of the qualified professionals that are managing the project. So some of the reasons why the impacts are minimal is that airborne surveys provide one of the most common first data acquisition projects. And this is where helicopter or fixed wing planes fly over the area with magnetometers and loops and other sensors to see the electrical and magnetic and density properties that the land has, and a high gravity or a high conductivity or a high magnetic or low magnetic source may become a deposit target. So then there's still traditional work of getting out and banging on the rocks and taking samples. And sometimes those airborne surveys need to follow up ground surveys that involves line cutting. And most of the line cutting that I did in the 1980s on projects was with Indigenous crews that came from Quebec. We need to, when we get a target, if the overburden is shallow, just a few meters, we like to be able to get a good look at the rock. And so we can use mechanical stripping using excavator or hydraulic stripping or hand stripping to expose the rock. But afterwards, try to get it back to the original state. Also selecting where we're going to look. Here in this project, we got in right after a clear cutting operation. And so that there was even minimal land disturbance, and any disturbance that we did in 2016, 6 years later, this is what it looked like after we reseeded and replanted trees. So science-based targets are then prioritized for testing, and the geologists look at the core and are trying to recognize whether an ore-forming environment affected the rocks. And geophysical surveys can go down the drill hole to allow the geophysicists to refine what the extent of something that was seen in the hole, whether it extends, whether you clipped the edge of something or just missed it, or you went through the center of it. So after diamond drilling, there's best practices are to get it cleaned up and return to its natural condition as soon as possible. Again, here on this project, the drilling occurred in a clearing that had been opened up for trenching. The trenching produced positive results, and so to get the three-dimensional aspects of that target, the diamond drill was brought in. So most projects, the overwhelming number of projects, don't make it to a maiden discovery stage. So those 323 exploration projects in 2022 that took place. Literally a handful would have a maiden drill hole discovery that they're working with. And most of them are actually following up on what they think is a drill hole discovery that they're trying to prove up. So the idea of a drill hole discovery is one that encounters ore grade mineralization over mineable widths. And you don't know if you've had an actual mineral deposit discovery until you have many, many holes through the target. And so you have to build a mineral deposit resource around that maiden drill hole. And what we're finding is that over the past 50 years, the rate of discoveries that resulted in mines have steadily declined. And one reason for that is in the 1950s and 1960s, airborne surveys were able to identify targets that were then diamond drilled. And now we are fine-tuning the geophysical equipment to see deeper and see different properties that we haven't looked for before. And so that it's the rate of discoveries falling off doesn't mean that the resources have all been found. It just means that it's more difficult after a period of relative ease in the 1950s and 60s to find deposits. So a mineral deposit resource that merits consideration for development is a project's fourth key turning point. This is an opportunity for economic development officers. Those sorts of news releases will be coming out. The companies will be most interested in working with the communities now that they realize that there's a good chance that they have something to develop with more advanced exploration. So here the drill programs and other studies continue on. Typically now this would be require several years just for the technical work, but it's also when the things are a project needs to have a lot of consultation with the potentially affected communities. So right now there's 43 advanced exploration projects. And the table on the left lists these 43 advanced exploration projects. 27 of them are in precious metals, which are mostly gold. 10 are in base metals, 2 in industrial minerals, and 4 in lithium. And the map on the right shows out of the Atlas of Canada, shows the Ontario and Quebec top 100 exploration projects. And so that doesn't include all of the best that includes the best projects in Ontario related to the rest of the country, but it doesn't include all of the projects that are in the table on the left. So the next stage is the feasibility stage, and you're getting to be about halfway there to a mine. And this is when all the technical resource and mine planning data is integrated with financial data to obtain an estimated return of investment for the project. The object is to have about a 20% return on investment. And so a decision to proceed is a project's fifth key turning point. And a lot of projects that have made it to this stage just don't have the economic feasibility. The people behind the project have been so confident in or overconfident in the project. And so this is where there's a good, solid, objective review of what the project could be, and gets turned down by the independent reviewers that are involved with making this recommendation. So this marks the end of exploration stages 2 to 5 and the start of development stages 6 to 9. So a good review of the Ring of Fire is in Virginia Heffernan's book that goes over the how we got to where we are with the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is that area in the very north of the province, shown in red, where one of the deposits is shown. This graphic here shows the mining advanced exploration project distribution across the province. The ones in southern Ontario are largely the existing industrial mineral producers that we looked at, the salt, gypsum, and magnetite and wollastonite deposits, whereas most of the rest of them are predominantly gold and with some base metal and several lithium deposits. So at this stage, extensive environmental studies that are packaged up into environmental assessment reports, bulk sampling, getting in and looking at the ore body, doing the complete feasibility and raising funds and getting government permits and buying, getting all ready to justify and prepare for the mine is this stage here. Stage 7 is the only revenue generating, or the main revenue generating stage in a resource development. All that exploration involved capital that had to be raised as investments. And so that have to remember that, there's only 35 active mines at the end of 2022 in the province. 17 are the precious metals, 9 are the base metals, and 9 are industrial mineral mines. And these mines may not be profitable due to current economic conditions. And we're seeing a high volatility on some of the metal prices that they're 30%, their value is 30% less than it was at the end of 2022. So closure decisions are never easy. Companies seek every way to avoid a closure decision and will prefer to go on care and maintenance to weather the adverse conditions. But the mine closure plan was all set out back in stage 6 and may have had monies set aside in case the mine has to close prematurely. So the closure plan is always able to accommodate the changes. The companies are actively involved with mine site exploration because they want to expand their resource that is on the land that they already have done all the permitting, and so they can continue. It's easier to amend a permit than it is to start from scratch. So once closure has happened, reclamation, of course, applies to all mining stages, and it's best that reclamation happens as soon as possible after there's been any ground disturbance. Could be later the same day, or if the studies require a week or two, then they're closed up before by then as well. So reclamation is always included as part of permit applications to when there's ground disturbance, whether it's trenching, diamond drilling, or mining. And the professionals are responsible for the work are have to do the compliance reporting and inspections, and they are accountable for making sure that reclamation has occurred. So some of the mines, like the base metal mines, like up in Timmins, this is a view of the tailings ponds that have developed at the metallurgical site over the last 60 years. The reclamation was ongoing in that the containment dams and the integrity of the entire metallurgical site to make sure that it stayed where it was. The tailings management facility was working properly, and this at this particular site, there's still a lot of valuable trace metals still in this site that maybe tailings reprocessing may be part of its future. So when we look at the final stage, this is what do we want to do with a mine? And it might be one of those 6,000 historical mines that need to be made safe for the public, and so that the active mines, of course, have had their mine plans done, but the repurposing, looking at what the historic mining activity are in an area or in a community's backyard, the community could drive that, because the historical mining sites can remain a public concern because they never had closure, reclamation, and repurposing plans. But government programs related to environmental protection and public protection can provide an opportunity for the Indigenous local communities to be involved. So here's our break for questions or comments about part 2. And we're almost done. You there, Paul?
Just carry on, Bob. Just carry on.
Okay. All right. So part 3 is short, looking at the opportunities. And so hopefully this presentation was part of your gaining awareness of Ontario's mineral industry, and the references that will be provided online can help you learn more about what's available in your local area. And by all means, getting in touch with your resident geologist's office with questions is my recommendation as a first step. So looking at what your community capacity and resources are, and what community consultations are already in progress, and what the community wants to do, and what their consent and agreements are of course all good things to have behind, or have under your belt. The mineral projects in and adjacent their community, the resident geologist's office will be able to provide you with lots of detail on all of those exploration and any advanced exploration projects. They can also indicate where there has been mineral interest in the past. They have prospectivity maps online that show areas that the geologists at the Ontario government think have potential for follow-up. When living in remote communities, one of the things, we don't want gravel to travel. Aggregate should be sourced locally for the community needs, and so looking at what the unstaked mineral potential and the aggregate potential for community projects is key. And as I pointed out with those key turning points, that those key turning points are when projects are about to change and serve as an indication of when more consultation and discussions with proponents is wise. And so know that industry professionals are willing to fully engage with Indigenous partners, business, and individuals in explorer and developing mineral opportunities is you know, there's been certainly a change in the last 30 years regarding how much Indigenous participation is needed. So those were all the stages, the discovery and feasibility stages there, bracketing the development, are some of the key development opportunities. The reclamation up in that Kamoskosia site was a mine site that was developed during the Second World War by the federal government, and is still a ongoing reclamation concern. The early stages until a mine is built, or even when a mine is built, there are camps involved, and there's all these positions that can be staffed by Indigenous members of the community. And we had that earlier slide that showed how programs that can build capacity, training, and for those members. And coming down to a once-in-a-generational economic opportunity is looking at critical minerals. As we transition away from fossil fuels, we more than ever are going to need critical minerals that have been identified occurring across the country, and this is we need lots more lithium and nickel, graphite, cobalt, magnesium that are all in advanced project stages in Northern Ontario, and we need to have our own supply sources, because the supply source is not going to be, international supply sources are drying up. And so that, as part of that critical minerals study that the Canadian government is doing, they are recognizing the challenges both to the transition as well as to companies and to building capacity with the First Nations members. And some of the plans that they have involve strategies that directly involve First Nations. And one of these was the Indigenous Natural Resource Partnership that was launched a year ago, that had $80 million for projects. The applications were closed in March, but the website says to watch for the next round. And so since it was started in November, maybe there'll be something soon. So that concludes my presentation, and available for any questions or comments.
There are no comments or questions in the chat at the moment. If anybody would like to ask Bob a question, just turn on your microphone and ask away. Adam says, Miigwech for sharing all of this vitally important information. Have a great day.
Thank you.
So once again, as a reminder, this session has been recorded. That recording will be made available on Cando's website, edo.ca. Just go to the main menu bar and look for EDO tools. Click on that, and there'll be a drop-down menu that says mining tools for EDOs. And then you'll go onto that webpage, and the recording will be there. Bob's presentation will also be added later this week. And we'll also be adding all of Bob's resource links and webpage links as well. Jeff, you have a question?
Yes, thanks a lot, Bob, for the presentation. I'm just curious on how these resource companies are connecting or attempting to connect with Indigenous businesses or communities, and how that process of engagement is it a one-way street, or are Indigenous businesses encouraged to connect with the companies directly in their procurement departments?
Yes, and that is one of the challenges that industry has, is trying to get somebody to answer the call. And sometimes the finding here in Nova Scotia, we've always had good good success calling up the band office and getting together, and so that all the different communities that are around your project, it's not just the closest one that you need to contact. You need to contact in a 360 area around your project, because there are no firm boundaries to one community's territory. They're all overlapping. And so that the one thing that there's been times when communities have banded together or met together, but there isn't a one window approach available, and so that's I hope that economic development officers recognize that industry wants to be able to talk with multiple levels within the community, and an economic development officer should be somebody that is is important for both the community and to help facilitate economic development, and so that quite often we end up dealing with council, and it's and councils change every few years, and so continuity starts at step one and continues right through to stage 10. Jeff, you have another question?
Yes, thanks for answering that. The second question is in relations to the Indigenous benefits agreements. It's a bit of a two-part question, and the first part is, how, in your experience, how successful have these businesses been, these development businesses been with meeting their benefit agreements? And the second part is, do those companies, when they're subcontracting work out, are they requiring their subcontractors to also look for Indigenous business opportunities?
So the one of the earliest impact benefit agreements, the Macavik Agreement in northern Quebec, was put together by Falconbridge, and they've had several takeovers, and they're now Glencore, and the community benefit from the Raglan nickel operations did flow through to the communities, and so the community has decided at different times whether to how they are going to deal with those annual disbursements, and so that those are challenges where sometimes what should be a positive benefit boomerangs and has negative consequences, and so that the impact benefit, you'll notice that for all of the mines and advanced exploration projects outnumber the number of impact benefit agreements, and that reflects some of the uncertainty that we have of putting together impact benefit agreements and learning how the resource needs to be shared. And so these are still very much in progress. And so that and I think your second half of that question was
it was relating to subcontractors.
Yeah, so on subcontractors, I know that it's part of our leading practices, best practices to have that. I always took that, made that clear to people that were bidding on projects, that I wanted to know what their Indigenous partnerships are. And a lot of the drilling companies, for instance, where drilling is the one of the main components. The drilling companies do have both Indigenous participation within their regular workforce, as well as they will spin off for some areas a completely Indigenous workforce working in an area. Camps are another thing that camps in the helicopter and fixed wing suppliers. I know working in Northern Ontario, they proactively 10-15 years ago were trying to maximize their Indigenous participation, working in supplying the camps, and even sometimes the camp construction and management was contracted out, and those are great ways that local community members can be working alongside as a project develops. And we had great projects 20 years ago that I led in the northern Quebec. We had two rangers that were there for keeping an eye out for wildlife, and making sure that wildlife wasn't being the exploration program wasn't impacting wildlife, and the polar bears weren't impacting our camp. So
thank you, Bob. We're just approaching the top of the hour, and this session needs to end before that. I want to thank everyone for attending today. There was a comment about a lot of information to digest, and you're absolutely right, it is. That's why we've recorded it. That's why we'll have the full presentation available as well, and all the resources, so that you can then take elements that you want to kind of drill in, no pun intended, in terms of Bob's content, and have as much time as you need to go through the slides or the resources. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Please keep an eye on the Cando newsletter for some upcoming sessions that we'll be working with Bob on for the Northern Territories. So Nunavut, NWT, and Yukon. So if you wanted to reach out to Bob, easiest way is to send me a quick email. I've typed it into the chat, paul.macedo@edo.ca, and then I can just connect you to Bob via email. Okay? So again, thank you all. Thank you, Bob. Tremendous amount of knowledge. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And we wish you a good rest of your day. The recording will be available later today at edo.ca. Thank you again.
Thank you.